The smell reached her before anything else, rust and dried mud and something beneath both of those, something alive and patient and enduring. Essie had learned in 11 years of corridor work to pay attention to smells. They told the truth before the eyes could be misled. She had come to the Voreth corridor settlement to document trade customs among the Dravathi, who kept their accounting in knotted silk, and did not consider the exchange of goods to be a commercial act but a social one, a binding of obligations between families that could last generations. She had 3 weeks and a translation node and a room above a soap maker's stall. She had not come looking for anything else. The market occupied the lower third of the settlement, which had been built into the side of a mesa by people who were no longer there, their carved doorways now used as storage by the Dravathi, and as shelter by everyone else who had drifted into the corridor looking for work or passage or a place to be forgotten. Essie moved through it slowly, as she always did, her recorder light blinking at her collar, her attention distributed, the weight of a bolt of cloth, the way 2 merchants touched hands when a price was agreed, the particular angle at which the awnings had been constructed to catch shadow rather than light, since direct sun was something the Dravathi experienced as an imposition. She almost walked past her. The chain was short. That was what made it visible, not its presence, since chains appeared throughout the market attached to crates and animals and equipment of all kinds, but its length. It allowed the figure crouched beneath the merchant's overhang to stand, perhaps, or to reach the water dish that sat just at the limit of the tether's range, but nothing more. The post was iron. The cuff was iron. The figure attached to it was Valen. Essie had met Valen once before, briefly, at a transit station. A delegation of navigators awaiting clearance, silver-skinned and tall, their chest tones audible even through the station walls as they communicated in their layered way, several conversations occurring simultaneously at frequencies that overlapped and harmonized. She had found them remarkable. She had written 3 pages in her field journal that night about the way sound operated as both language and identity among them. The way a Valen separated from their resonance group went quieter in a way that was not merely social but physical, as if something in the architecture of their voice had been removed. This one was quiet. She sat with her knees drawn in, her silver skin dulled with dust, her amber eyes fixed on a point in the middle distance that was not the market, not the post, not the water dish, not anything Essie could identify. Her hands rested open on her knees. She was not sleeping. She was somewhere else. At the adjacent stall, a woman was selling flat bread and preserved fruit, and the smell of it was warm and specific and entirely at odds with everything else. Essie bought 2 portions without deciding to. She paid more than was asked because she was still looking at the Valen and not at the merchant. She carried the food to the edge of the chain's reach and set it on the ground between them, within the tether's range, but placed gently, without approach, without expectation. She did not speak. She did not know what language would be understood. She did not want to make a noise that would require the Valen to respond when responding cost effort she might not have. The amber eyes moved. They moved from the middle distance to the food, and then from the food to Essie's face, and in that movement there was something Essie recognized, not gratitude, not suspicion, but the particular quality of attention that a person gives to something unexpected. The recalibration, the reassessment. She had not been looked at in a long time, looked at as if she were someone who could look back. Essie stood for a moment longer, then walked on. She did not write anything in her field journal that night. She sat at the window above the soap maker's stall and listened to the settlement settle into its evening sounds, and she thought about the length of a chain and the distance to a water dish, and she did not sleep well. She returned the next morning with water and a translation node. The node was a compromised technology. It worked best between species with established contact records, and the Valen were not well documented in the corridor's archives, so what it produced was approximate, a rendering of likely meaning derived from partial phonemic mapping and probability weighting, which was to say that it was often wrong in the precise way that a poor dictionary is wrong, capturing the word while losing the sense. Essie had worked with worse. The Valen was in the same position. The food was gone. The water dish was empty. Essie refilled the dish first. She had brought a flask, and set it within reach, and then she settled herself cross-legged on the ground at a distance that she judged to be non-threatening, which was an imprecise judgment since she did not know this species well enough to know what threatening looked like in their perception of space. She placed the node between them and activated it. "My name is Essie," she said. "I'm an anthropologist. I document how people live. I'm not from the corridor administration and I have nothing to do with the merchants here." The node produced a series of tones. Essie did not know if they were accurate. She waited. The Valen looked at the node. Then she made a sound, not speech exactly, not in the way Essie thought of speech, but something that originated in the chest and moved outward in a wave that Essie felt in her sternum more than she heard with her ears. The node processed it for a long moment. "You are alone," it rendered, with a confidence rating of 61%. "Yes," Essie said, "I travel alone." Another chest tone, longer this time, with a falling quality at its end that might have been inquiry or might have been exhaustion. The node gave her. "Why?" "I find it easier to pay attention when I'm not managing other people," Essie said. "And I find people more willing to talk to one person than to a group." The Valen regarded her. "I have not talked," the node rendered, "in a long time." "I know," Essie said. "You don't have to talk now." She opened her pack and took out her field journal, the physical one, not the recorder, and began writing her notes from the previous day about the Dravathi silk accounting, which had nothing to do with the Valen and which she genuinely needed to write. She kept her attention on the page. She did not watch. After perhaps 20 minutes the chest tone came again, unprompted. The node rendered it as a name, Saravan, or near enough. "Saravan," Essie repeated aloud, testing the vowels. She looked up. "Is that close?" The amber eyes held something that might, in another face, have been the beginning of a smile. Over 2 days it went like this. Essie came in the morning and stayed through the middle heat and left when the evening merchants arrived and the noise made conversation impossible. She brought water and food each time, always setting it within reach without ceremony. Saravan had been a navigator. This came through gradually. In fragments the node assembled imperfectly, enough that Essie could infer the rest. Her ship had been taken by people whose name the node rendered as something like those who collect the lost. She had been sold in the Vorath corridor 3 seasons ago. She had been here since then. Essie did not ask why Saravan had not been bought. She suspected she understood. A Valen navigator alone, separated from her resonance group, was quieter and stranger than a Valen navigator in company, less legible, harder to assess. The traders who moved through the corridor were looking for things they could price and understand. They had not found a frame for Saravan, and so they had left her here, costing nothing, generating no return, waiting for someone to name a value. On the second afternoon, Essie made a mistake. She was sketching the constellation pattern she knew as the Watcher, a human mapping, her grandmother's name for it, who had taught her the sky from a rooftop in a city that no longer existed in its old form, and she showed the sketch to Saravan without thinking about what it was she was doing. Saravan looked at it for a long time. Then she reached out, the chain allowed it barely, and corrected the angle of one star with her fingertip. "Wrong," the gesture said clearly, like this. "Show me," Essie said. What Saravan drew was not the Watcher. It was a pathway, a route between stars, not a picture made of them, because that was how Valen navigators saw the sky, not as images but as roads. She traced it with a finger in the dust at the limit of her reach, and the tracing was precise and deliberate and completely different from the vacant quality Essie had seen in her on the first day. Essie drew back a star path she knew, a human one, simple, the route between 2 early transit points that every trainee navigator memorized in the first year. Saravan looked at it. She tilted her head. She corrected an angle. For the next hour they argued about stars in a language neither of them spoke, through a node that kept offering 60% confidence renderings of things that were probably not quite right. And Saravan spoke more than she had since Essie arrived, her chest tones coming with more frequency and less effort, the quality of them changing in ways Essie could not name but could feel, warmer, perhaps, or more present, or simply more there. This was what the Valen called thieving. Essie looked it up that night, finding it in a partial linguistic survey from a research station 6 corridors over, the place where 2 star paths cross and you know, for a moment, exactly where you are. It was a navigator's word. It was also, the survey noted, used colloquially to describe any moment of unexpected orientation, any meeting of minds that produced, briefly, clarity. The chain was real, so was the map she kept drawing in the dirt. On the 3rd morning, Essie went to the merchant before she went to the post. She had spent the night with her finances, a longer process than it should have been, since she kept approaching the number she had and finding it insufficient, and then reworking her return arrangements, and finding that if she eliminated certain margins and renegotiated certain transit bookings, and went without the equipment replacement she had been planning, the number became sufficient. She had done this 4 times to make sure she had not made an error, and she had not. The merchant was a Dravathi woman named Orev San, whose silk accounts Essie had been documenting that week, and who received her with the formal hospitality that the Dravathi extended to everyone who arrived in the morning, which was a cup of bitter tea and a specific silence that was not unfriendly but was not yet friendly. Essie drank the tea. She said she was interested in acquiring a navigator. She framed it as a professional matter. She traveled frequently. Her route planning was inefficient. Good navigators were difficult to find in the corridor. She did not say Saravan's name. She did not say anything that could be read as urgency. The negotiation took an hour. It was not hostile, only methodical, the Dravathi way of establishing that both parties understood the obligation being created. At the end of it, Essie had spent nearly everything she was carrying, including her return transit credit, which meant she would need to arrange different passage home by means she had not yet identified. She had a key on a length of cord. She thanked Orev San with the 3-part gesture that the Dravathi used for transactions that had concluded honorably, which she had learned that week, and which she hoped she was performing correctly. She walked to the post. She did not hurry. Saravan was in her usual position. The morning light hit her silver skin at an angle that made the dust on it visible, each particle distinct. She looked up when Essie came, and there was recognition in it. A Valen navigator recognizing a star that had come back on schedule, reliable, which was a kind of trust built from repetition rather than choice. Essie crouched at the limit of the chain's reach. She placed the key on the ground between them, not in Saravan's hand, not opened, not demonstrated, just placed on the ground halfway between them. Then she sat back. She did not speak. She did not explain what she had paid or why or what she wanted in return, because she did not want anything in return, and saying so would have taken the quality of a statement about herself rather than an act for someone else. The Dravathi had a word for this, a giving that asked the recipient only to receive. She did not know if the Valen had an equivalent. Saravan looked at the key. She looked at Essie. She looked at the key again. Then she reached out her hand steady, no trembling, the steadiness of someone who has survived 3 seasons by not permitting themselves to tremble, and picked it up. The lock opened on the 2nd try. The cuff fell. Saravan sat for a moment with her leg extended in front of her, the iron ring that had marked her ankle still there in the shape of pressed skin, and she did not move. She was not, Essie thought, deciding whether to run. She was simply sitting with a fact that had not yet settled into being real. Then she stood. She was very tall. Standing, she occupied the space differently. The space did not contain her but surrounded her, the way space surrounds a landmark. She stood for a moment looking at the market with the amber eyes, and Essie watched her take it in from this new height, this new distance, and could not read what she saw there. Then Saravan spoke. A single word, one chest tone, brief and complete. The node rendered it with a confidence rating of 49% as something like, "The one who found me at my thieving." Essie did not respond. She did not know how to respond. The word was not for her to receive gracefully. It was not a thing that could be received gracefully. It could only be acknowledged, and she did so by staying still and meeting the amber eyes and not looking away. "The nearest Valen transit beacon," Saravan said, through the node, more slowly and deliberately than she had ever spoken before. "Which direction?" Essie pulled up her corridor charts. "North by northeast from the settlement gate. 6 hours at a steady pace, maybe 5 if the road is good. There's a way station at the halfway point with water." Saravan received this information the way a navigator received a route. Completely, without acknowledgement that did not need to be spoken. She bent and picked up the iron cuff, the discarded thing, the ended thing, and held it for a moment. Then she set it down on the ground with a precision that was not careless and not ceremonial but something in between, a thing being marked as past. She turned to go, and then she stopped. She turned back and reached for Essie's hand, not asking, but not rough either, simply the gesture of someone for whom this was a natural act between navigators. She took Essie's palm and with one finger she traced a pattern on it, a star path, 3 points and the root between them, pressed into the skin with enough pressure to leave a temporary mark. It lasted perhaps the length of a breath. Essie did not know its name or where it led. She did not ask. Then Saravan walked, north by northeast, through the market without looking at it, past the stalls and the merchants and the noise, out through the settlement gate and into the road beyond, and she did not look back, and Essie understood, watching, that this was not coldness. For a navigator, looking back meant you were not yet on your way. It meant the departure had not yet begun. Not looking back was the honor. Essie stood at the edge of the market with her palm open, the traced lines already fatting from her skin in the morning heat, until the silver figure had reduced itself to a point on the road and then to nothing at all. Around her the market continued its ordinary business, the silk accounts, the exchanged obligations, the weight of goods passing between hands. She would need to renegotiate her transit home. She had notes to write. She had a cup of cold, bitter tea waiting in her room above the soap-maker's stall. She looked at her palm one more time before she closed it. She had not come to be remembered, she had come to be found, and she was.